What could possibly make a rock star quit a world-famous band at the height of its power? For a surprising number of heavy metal legends, the answer was God. From frontmen of thrash metal giants to glam rock icons, their stories are some of the most dramatic in music history, and we're telling them all. 1. Brian "Head" Welch of Korn. Many people are crazy about the band Korn. You see, back in the late 90s and early 2000s, they were one of the biggest bands on the planet. They basically invented a whole new genre of music called nu metal, mixing heavy guitar riffs with hip-hop beat. At the center of that sound was their guitarist, Brian Welch, better known to everyone as Head. With his long braided hair and intense stage presence, he was the picture of a rock superstar. Korn sold over 40 million albums worldwide. They were playing to massive crowds every night and living the kind of life most musicians only dream of. But not all things are what they seem. Behind the sold-out shows and the platinum albums, Head was struggling. The constant touring and the pressures of fame took a huge toll. He was dealing with some serious personal demons and a heavy reliance on certain substances to get through the day. The most shocking fact is that even with all the money and success, he felt completely empty inside. He has said in interviews that he was a shell of a person, chasing something to fill a void that just kept getting bigger. The turning point came in a way no one expected. He looked at his little girl and saw the path he was on, and he knew something had to change, and fast. He found himself turning to faith, looking for an answer he couldn't find anywhere else. In 2005, he made a decision that sent shockwaves through the entire music industry. He quit Korn. What many overlooked was what he was giving up. He walked away from a reported $23 million record deal. He chose his faith and his daughter over being in one of the world's biggest rock bands. After leaving, Head's life changed completely. He became a devoted Christian, was baptized in the Jordan River, and started telling his story to anyone who would listen. He wrote a best-selling book called Save Me From Myself that laid out his entire journey in stunning detail. He even released his own solo music with a more positive and faith-based message. For years, it seemed like his time in Korn was a closed chapter. But in a twist nobody saw coming, he eventually rejoined the band in 2013, bringing his newfound faith with him and proving that you can go home again. Head's journey from a troubled rock star to a man of faith is incredible. But what about a musician who left an even more legendary band, not just once, but twice, all because of his beliefs? 2. Dan Spitz of Anthrax. When you talk about the history of thrash metal, there are 4 bands that stand above all the rest. They call them the Big Four: Metallica, Slayer, Megadeth, and Anthrax. Anthrax was known for their high energy, their streetwise attitude, and the lightning-fast guitar riffs of their lead guitarist, Dan Spitz. From the mid-'80s to the mid-'90s, Dan was a metal hero. He helped write some of the band's most iconic songs and toured the world, playing to legions of headbanging fans. Anthrax was a huge deal, and Dan Spitz was at the top of his game. But while the band was singing about chaos and mayhem, Dan was going through a very different kind of journey. To put it mildly, he was searching for something deeper than what the rock and roll lifestyle could offer. Raised in a Jewish family, he began to explore his roots more seriously. This exploration led him to become a Messianic Jew, which is a person who maintains their Jewish heritage while believing that Jesus is the Messiah. This was a profound and life-altering change for him. The thing is, this new path didn't exactly line up with the world of a touring thrash metal band. In 1995, Dan decided he had to leave Anthrax to focus on his faith and his family. He didn't just. 2. Dan Spitz of Anthrax. Nobody could have predicted. He became a master watchmaker. You heard that right. He traded his guitar for tiny gears and springs, becoming one of the most respected watchmakers in Switzerland. He even earned the prestigious Bulova Ambassador Award for his skills. It was a complete 180-degree turn from his life on the road. He did return to Anthrax for a reunion tour in 2005, but left again a couple of years later, stating that his heart was still not in it. His faith remained his priority. He has since worked on some other music projects, including a Christian metal band, but he never fully returned to the secular metal scene that made him famous. He chose a quieter, more precise life over the roar of the crowd. From a thrash metal icon to a master of timepieces, Dan Spitz's story is one of a kind. But our next musician didn't just leave his band for faith. He became a leader in the church. Third Mark Broomhead of Seventh Angel. Third Mark Broomhead of Seventh Angel. In the world of heavy metal, there's a smaller but very dedicated subgenre known as Christian metal. These bands combine the heavy, aggressive sound of metal with lyrics that focus on faith and spirituality. One of the pioneering bands of this movement in the United Kingdom was a group called Seventh Angel. They played a style of thrash and doom metal, and their frontman and bass player was a guy named Mark Broomhead. In the early 90s, they were making a name for themselves in the European metal scene. Seventh Angel was respected for their musical talent and their serious approach to their faith. They weren't a gimmick. They were a real-deal metal band that just happened to sing about God instead of darkness. Mark Broomhead was the driving force behind the band, writing powerful lyrics and delivering them with intense passion. They released a couple of classic albums and were seen as leaders in the Christian metal world. But after a few years, the band decided to call it quits. What many overlooked at the time was that Mark's journey in faith was just getting started. He didn't just want to sing about his beliefs, he wanted to live them in a much more direct way. He felt a calling to serve the church not as a musician, but as a minister. He went back to school, studied theology, and began the long process of becoming a priest. Today, Mark Broomhead is a vicar in the Church of England. He leads a congregation and serves his community in a way that is a world away from the metal clubs he used to play in. The most shocking fact is that he hasn't forgotten his roots. He has even started a special service for the metal and biker communities in his area, creating a space where people who might not feel comfortable in a traditional church can come and explore their faith. He's a true rock and roll pastor. It's one thing to be a pastor who used to be in a Christian metal band, but our next story is about a man who played in a regular secular band before starting his very own heavy metal church. 4. Brian Smith of St. Helien. Many people dream of being a rock star, playing loud music on stage, and living the tour life. Brian Smith was one of those people. He was the guitarist for a secular heavy metal band called St. Helien, a group that was grinding it out on the club circuit, trying to make a name for themselves. They were just like thousands of other bands, writing songs, playing shows, and hoping for that big break. It was a life dedicated to the sound and fury of heavy metal. But then something happened that changed the entire course of Brian's life. He had a powerful conversion experience and became a committed Christian. You see, this wasn't just a casual change of heart. His newfound faith became the most important thing in his life, and he felt an overwhelming need to share it with others. He started talking about his beliefs to his bandmates and to people at their shows. To put it mildly, his band wasn't too thrilled about it. The thing nobody tells you is how tough it can be when your personal beliefs start to clash with your professional life. His bandmates felt that his constant talk about religion was not a good fit for their image as a secular metal band. They eventually gave him an ultimatum, telling him he had to tone it down. Brian knew he couldn't do that, so he made the tough decision to leave the band he had poured his heart and soul into. But this is where the story gets really amazing. Brian didn't just join a local church. He decided to combine his two biggest passions, heavy metal and his faith. In 2011, he founded the First Heavy Metal Church of Christ in Dayton, Ohio. It's a real church, but it's unlike any other. The music is loud, live heavy metal, the dress code is jeans and band t-shirts, and the message is one of hope and acceptance. Brian Smith is the senior pastor, and he has created a place where headbangers and outcasts can feel at home while worshiping. Starting a metal church is a bold move. But what happens when the frontman of a hugely popular modern metal band decides to trade the stage for the pulpit. Our next star did just that. 5. Mattie Montgomery of For Today. In the 2000s and 2010s, the metalcore scene was huge. One of the bands at the very forefront of that movement was a group called For Today. They were known for their intense, high-energy live shows and the powerful, commanding vocals of their frontman, Mattie Montgomery. The band was unapologetically Christian, and they were one of the most successful acts in the Christian metal world, even crossing over to find a large audience in the secular scene. Mattie was more than just a singer. He was a captivating performer who would often pause between songs to speak to the crowd, sharing his testimony and messages of hope. He had a unique ability to connect with young fans who were struggling with their own problems. For Today toured relentlessly, playing on huge festival stages like the Vans Warped Tour and building a massive, dedicated following. They were on top of the Christian metal world, but as the years went on, Mattie felt a different kind of calling. The same passion he used to deliver his powerful screams on stage was pulling him in a new direction. He felt that his time as a touring musician was coming to an end, and that he was meant to lead a church full-time. Many people were crazy about the band, so it was a huge shock to their fans when, in 2016, For Today announced they were breaking up. Mattie didn't waste any time. He became the senior pastor at a church and poured all of his energy into his new role. The most shocking fact, though, is the impact he has had since leaving the music industry. He has used his platform as a pastor to launch massive charity initiatives. One of his projects raised millions of dollars to pay off the medical debts of families in need. He went from a metalcore icon to a spiritual leader, making a huge, tangible difference in people's lives. It's inspiring to see someone use their platform for so much good. But our next musician is one of the most legendary and controversial figures in all of thrash metal, whose turn to faith changed everything. 6. Dave Mustaine of Megadeth. The story of Dave Mustaine is one of the most dramatic in heavy metal history. You see, he was the original lead guitarist for Metallica, but in the early days, his fiery personality and hard-partying lifestyle led to him being kicked out of the band right before they recorded their first album. Fueled by anger and a desire for revenge, he formed his own band, Megadeth. Megadeth went on to become one of the big four of thrash metal, selling over 50 million records and becoming a legendary act in their own right. For decades, Dave Mustaine was the ultimate metal anti-hero. He was known for his snarling vocals, his incredibly complex guitar playing, and his outspoken, often confrontational, personality. He had public feuds with his former bandmates in Metallica and was known for a wild and chaotic lifestyle. His music was fast, aggressive, and often dealt with dark and political themes. But in 2002, something happened that no one saw coming. After years of struggling with personal issues, Dave Mustaine announced that he had become a born-again Christian. This was a massive shock to the metal community. How could the angry, rebellious leader of Megadeth embrace religion? Many fans were skeptical and some even felt betrayed. But Dave was serious. His newfound faith had a huge impact on him and his music. The thing nobody tells you is how it changed his professional decisions. At one point, he refused to play shows with bands he considered to be satanic, causing some controversy on the festival circuit. His lyrics also started to reflect his new worldview, with songs that explored themes of redemption and faith. He even started holding prayer circles with fans before shows. While he remains a fiery and outspoken figure, his faith has become a central part of his identity, both personally and as the leader of Megadeth. Dave Mustaine's conversion was a shocker, but it's nothing compared to our next star, a man who built his entire career on being the ultimate rock and roll villain. 7. Alice Cooper. Before there was Marilyn Manson, before there was Slipknot, there was Alice Cooper. He is the original shock rocker. Starting in the late 60s, Alice Cooper, who was both the name of the singer and the band, created a whole new kind of rock show. It was a theatrical horror show, complete with guillotines, fake blood, and giant snakes. He created a villainous character and sang songs about dark and spooky subjects. To put it mildly, parents in the 70s were terrified of him, which of course made kids love him even more. Alice Cooper became a global superstar with massive hits like School's Out and No More Mr. Nice Guy. His concerts were legendary events. He was the king of a dark, theatrical world he had created all by himself. His lifestyle off the stage was just as wild. He was a famous member of the Hollywood Vampires, a celebrity drinking club that also included John Lennon and Keith Moon. He was living the rock and roll dream to the absolute fullest. But by the early 80s, that dream had become a nightmare. Years of hard living had taken their toll, and he found himself in a very dark place, battling serious personal demons. It was at this lowest point that he rediscovered the faith he had grown up with. His father was a preacher, and Alice returned to the church, becoming a born-again Christian. What many overlooked is that he didn't stop being Alice Cooper. He found a way to balance his faith with his on-stage persona. He still performs his horror-themed shows, but he sees it as playing a character, like an actor in a movie. The most shocking fact is what he does off stage. He is very active in his local church, where he leads Bible studies. He says his faith saved his life and gave him a new purpose. He's living proof that even the scariest monsters can see the light. A shock rocker finding faith is one thing, but what about the drummer for one of the biggest traditional heavy metal bands of all time? His journey is just as surprising. 8. Nicko McBrain of Iron Maiden. Iron Maiden is more than a band. They are a global institution. For over 40 years, they have been one of the biggest and most beloved heavy metal bands in the world. Their epic songs, incredible live shows, and iconic mascot, Eddie, are legendary. And behind the drum kit, driving their galloping rhythm since 1982, is the one and only Nicko McBrain. Known for his powerful and complex drumming style, as well as his fun-loving and goofy personality, Nicko is a fan favorite. For years, Nicko lived the typical rock star life on the road. Iron Maiden's tours are massive, multi-year undertakings that take them to every corner of the globe. The lifestyle was one of constant motion, playing to huge stadiums and then moving on to the next city. He was a key part of one of the most successful metal machines in history, a band that has sold over 100 million albums. But in 1999, while on tour in Florida, something profound happened to him. His wife had been a Christian for a while, and he would sometimes go to church with her. One day during a service, he felt an overwhelming connection and decided to commit his life to his faith. It was a quiet and personal decision, but one that changed him completely. The thing is, he didn't leave Iron Maiden. He found a way to make his faith work within the band, and you can see this everywhere in his life now. He is an active deacon at his local church in Florida when he's not on tour. He often shares his testimony in interviews and with fans. What many people find amazing is how he reconciles his faith with some of Iron Maiden's darker imagery and song titles, like The Number of the Beast. He explains that he sees the band's music as storytelling, not as a promotion of evil. His faith has given him a sense of peace and stability in the chaotic world of rock and roll. Nicko found a way to balance his faith with his band, but our next musician's journey led him to completely change the lyrical direction of his controversial band. 9. Blackie Lawless of WASP. In the 1980s, the Parents Music Resource Center, or PMRC, waged a war against heavy metal music they deemed to be offensive. And one of the main targets of their outrage was a band called WASP and its leader, Blackie Lawless. WASP was one of the most notorious and controversial bands of the glam metal era. Their live shows were filled with shock tactics, and their lyrics were often about very adult themes. Blackie Lawless, with his saw-blade-adorned stage clothes, was seen by many as a true menace to society. WASP sold millions of records, fueled by the controversy that surrounded them. Songs with titles that can't be repeated here made them infamous. Blackie Lawless was a master of provocation, and he built a career on being a rebellious and dangerous figure. For a generation of young metal fans, he was a hero who stood against authority. For a generation of parents, he was a nightmare. But as the years went by, the man behind the saw blades began to change. Like Alice Cooper, Blackie Lawless had grown up in the church. And in the 1990s, after years of living the wild rock and roll lifestyle, he found his way back to his Christian faith. It wasn't an overnight change, but a gradual return to the beliefs he had left behind as a young man. What's really fascinating is how this affected his music. He's still the frontman of WASP, but the band's lyrical themes have shifted dramatically. The most shocking fact is that recent WASP albums, like Golgotha, are filled with explicitly Christian themes. He now writes songs about the crucifixion, redemption, and his own spiritual struggles. He has said in interviews that he can no longer perform some of his old, controversial songs because they conflict with his current beliefs. The ultimate rebel had found a new cause. Blackie Lawless's band was controversial, but it was nothing compared to the dark and intense world of our next artist, the frontman of the legendary band Slayer. 10. Tom Araya of Slayer. For fans of extreme metal, the band Slayer is holy ground. As one of the big four of thrash, Slayer took the speed and aggression of the genre and pushed it to its absolute limits. Their music was faster, heavier, and darker than anyone else's. Their lyrics and album art often dealt with very intense and controversial subjects, which made them one of the most feared and revered bands in metal history. At the front of it all was bassist and vocalist Tom Araya. With his powerful scream and his intense stage presence, Tom was the face of one of music's most extreme bands. For over 35 years, he led Slayer as they toured the globe, building a fiercely loyal fan base. The band's image was one of pure, unapologetic darkness. So it came as a huge surprise to many fans when they learned that Tom Araya is a practicing Catholic. You see, Tom has been open about his faith for years, but it's something that many people struggle to understand. How can the frontman of Slayer, a band with an album titled God Hates Us All, be a man of faith? In interviews, Tom has explained that he has a very personal and strong belief system. He separates the lyrical content of the band, much of which was written by guitarist Kerry King, from his own spiritual life. He sees his role in the band as that of a performer and storyteller. The thing nobody tells you is how his faith helped him cope with the band's dark themes and the often chaotic life of a touring musician. It provided him with a sense of grounding and perspective. In 2019, Slayer played their final show and retired from touring. Tom has said that a big part of his decision to retire was his desire to spend more time with his family and focus on his personal life, a life where his faith plays a central role. The man who fronted the most infamous band in metal was, in his own way, a man of peace. Tom Araya's quiet faith is surprising, but our next musician's journey into religion was much more public and came after a long struggle with his own dark image. 11. Peter Steele of Type O Negative. In the 1990s, Gothic metal had a king, and his name was Peter Steele. As the frontman for the band Type O Negative, Peter was an imposing and unforgettable figure. He was a giant of a man, standing 6 feet 8 inches tall, with a deep, vampiric voice and a dark, sarcastic sense of humor. The band's music was slow, heavy, and romantic, a unique blend of doom metal and gothic rock. They became huge stars with their album Bloody Kisses, and Peter Steele became a gothic icon. The band's image was built around themes of romance, gloom, and a kind of dark sensuality. Peter even posed for a famous women's magazine, which only added to his mystique. For years, he played the part of the brooding, romantic vampire, and fans loved him for it. His lyrics were deeply personal, often exploring his own battles with depression and loss with a signature wit. But behind the dark humor, Peter was a deeply troubled person. He struggled for years with personal issues and substance abuse, which led to some very difficult times, including a stint in jail. It was during this dark period that he began to reconnect with his Catholic faith. To put it mildly, it was a dramatic and profound change for a man who had built a career on a dark and gloomy image. The most shocking fact is how openly he embraced his faith in his music. Type O Negative's final album, released in 2007, was titled Dead Again. The album cover even featured a picture of the famous Russian mystic Rasputin. The lyrics on that album were filled with Christian references and explored Peter's newfound spirituality. He talked openly in interviews about his conversion, calling himself a prophet of doom for God. Sadly, Peter passed away in 2010, but he left behind a final album that served as a powerful testament to his late-in-life spiritual awakening. Peter Steele's story is a powerful one. Our next two entries are from the same legendary band, proving that faith can be a powerful force even within a single group. 12. David Ellefson of Megadeth. As we talked about earlier, Megadeth is one of the biggest names in thrash metal. And for most of the band's history, there was one other constant alongside frontman Dave Mustaine. That was bassist David Ellefson. With his powerful and complex bass lines, David was a co-founder of the band and a crucial part of their signature sound. He was there for all the big albums, the world tours, and the incredible success. Like his bandmate Dave Mustaine, David Ellefson lived the fast-paced life of a metal star in the 80s. The stories of the band's early days are legendary for their wildness and excess. But that lifestyle eventually caught up with him. He found himself struggling with personal demons and knew he needed to make a major change if he was going to survive. In the early 90s, he got clean and began a new chapter in his life. A big part of that new chapter was his faith. What many overlooked is that David's journey into faith was not just a personal one. He felt a strong calling to go even deeper. He began studying to become a pastor. This led him to enroll in a Lutheran seminary, where he dedicated himself to learning and ministry. It's a path that few rock stars have ever taken. The most shocking fact is that for a time, he was both a touring bassist in a world-famous metal band and an ordained minister. In 2012, he officially became an ordained Lutheran pastor. He has even started his own congregation in Arizona. He has said that his goal is to create a church that is welcoming to everyone, especially those who might feel like outcasts. He has found a unique way to bridge the gap between the world of heavy metal and the world of faith. David Ellefson's path to becoming a pastor is remarkable, but he wasn't the only member of a huge nu metal band to have a life-changing spiritual experience. His story has some surprising parallels with our next musician, 13th Fieldy of Korn. We already talked about how Korn's guitarist, Head, left the band for a number of years after finding his faith. But what many people don't know is that another founding member of the band had a very similar experience. Reginald Arvizu, better known as Fieldy, is Korn's bassist. His unique slapping bass style is one of the most recognizable and influential sounds in modern metal. He helped create the band's groundbreaking sound and was there from the very beginning. Like the rest of his bandmates, Fieldy was swept up in the whirlwind of fame that came with Korn's success. The band was known for their hard-partying ways, and Fieldy was right in the middle of it all. The lifestyle was taking a heavy toll on him personally, and his relationships were suffering. He was on a destructive path and didn't know how to get off it. The turning point for Fieldy came in a very emotional and personal way. His father, who was a born-again Christian, was very ill. On his deathbed, he made Fieldy promise that he would clean up his life and turn to God. This powerful moment had a huge impact on Fieldy. He decided to honor his father's dying wish. He became a born-again Christian and, amazingly, was able to stop his destructive habits cold turkey. You see, his conversion changed everything for him. He wrote a book called Got the Life: My Journey of Addiction, Faith, Recovery, and Corn that details his entire story. While he never left corn, his faith became the central focus of his life. He has even released his own solo music with a more spiritual and positive message. Along with his bandmate Head, Fieldy has brought a new spiritual dimension to one of metal's most famous bands.